You're watching 5 as we kick off a 2-hour special now, exploring some of the mysteries that lie behind the ancient city as Peter Snow and Edwina Silva host Pompeii Live.
At lunchtime, on a hot August day in 79 AD, this mountain exploded without any warning. Within hours, thousands of Roman people had died, and life in this luxurious and sophisticated city of Pompeii came to an abrupt end.
When the volcano struck here at Herculaneum, which is just around the Bay of Naples, the city was buried under 5 times the amount of rubble as Pompeii, leaving us with an extraordinary legacy.
And that's the legacy we're going to see tonight. We have unique access to work going on now. A rare glimpse of latest efforts to open up for us today what life was like here 2,000 years ago. Welcome to Pompeii Live. You join us tonight in 2 of the most spectacular Roman cities in the world. What was so remarkable about this eruption was that it was not lava that buried these cities. If it had been, they would have been wiped out. I'm in Pompeii, and it was because it was this stuff, pumice and ash, that buried this place, that it's been preserved and frozen in time for nearly 2,000 years and captured everyone's imagination. The houses and the streets stand today as a lasting reminder of everyday life in a busy Roman city, a unique snapshot of a comfortable and highly developed lifestyle. Pompeii has yielded both wonderful and heartrending insights into how the Romans lived and died. Perhaps this is what most sticks in people's minds when they think of Pompeii, the last agony of an ordinary human being captured so vividly in plaster. Later in the programme, we'll be discovering not just how these people died, but how their bodies were preserved. We'll also be going behind the scenes, into areas that the public never see, to reveal what made the Romans live so well.
I'm in Herculaneum, just a few kilometres from Pompeii. It's a coastal town, smaller than its more famous neighbour, but in many ways even more interesting. When Vesuvius erupted, Herculaneum was buried by this stuff, volcanic material known as pyroclastic mud. So far, only a quarter of the site has actually been excavated. I'm standing here where the beach would have been in Roman times. If you look up there, you can see how over 20 metres of molten mud and rock completely engulfed the whole town. But Herculaneum is crumbling. For the last year and a half, 5 has been following the progress of the Herculaneum Conservation Project, who are striving to save this site. Already, they've made some remarkable discoveries. In May last year, work began clearing the Roman beach area at the foot of the House of the Telephus Relief. This is thought to be where Nonius Balbus and his family lived, having one of the finest sea views in Herculaneum. An earlier excavation had revealed what looked like the skeletons of a baby and a dog. So this time, the team were more cautious than usual. In September of last year, we were called back. No bones yet, but what they had found was a huge piece of the 3-storey colonnaded building hurled into the sea by the angry volcano.
You've got the entire anatomy of the destruction of the portico up above us. Here you have a great column. You can see the base of the column. You can see the shaft of the column disappearing downwards because it's been thrust downwards by the force of the eruption. And there are bits of tiles, roof tiles probably, and here's a great wooden beam, another great wooden beam under it. So you've got all the structures from up there thrown down by the force of the eruption.
Incredible. I mean, it really shows you the force, doesn't it? That's what is so interesting about this.
Yes, it's an avalanche of solid rock but liquid rock, just flowing through the site, and everything that can be swept away by it is swept down.
Extraordinary. And tonight we're going to see the results of that very important rescue work. I'm with Andrew again, who's the director of the project. Andrew, tell me, why is the work that you're doing here so important?
Well, this site is incredibly precious. It opens a unique window on the ancient world, but at the same time, it's very, very fragile. When this project started, it was literally falling to pieces. There were roofs broken, frescoes falling from the walls, weeds growing everywhere. And what we're trying to do is stop that.
So how did the site get into such a place where it really needed your help?
Well, what people don't understand is that archaeology creates a risk. They think of archaeology as something that saves the past from being buried, but it doesn't. It exposes the past to destruction. And unless you put money and effort into conserving it, maintaining it, looking after it, and this is very, very expensive, no politician ever understands, you will lose it to a second destruction.
So just so I understand this, you're saying that the minute the site gets excavated, it starts on a cycle of decay instantly.
It does.
I mean, well, listen, we'll see more of the team's work later, so join us with them later.
Later in this special live programme, we'll be revealing in detail what happened when Vesuvius erupted.
The energy is in the order of tens of nuclear explosions.
We have privileged access to a house in Pompeii where we witness a poignant moment just before the city died. And do you think he escaped? Our behind-the-scenes tour also includes a storeroom in Herculaneum full of exquisite artifacts.
It's a loaf of bread.
A loaf of Roman bread.
I wouldn't recommend you eat it.
And we'll be going into one of Herculaneum's most important buildings, still buried by the volcano, the Basilica, to reveal its latest secrets. And with me here tonight is Guy de la Bedouillère, historian and expert on Rome and everything Roman. Now, Guy, what is it that excites you so much about Pompeii?
Peter, every time I've come here over the last 30 years, walking through the gate into this place is like walking through a portal into the Roman Empire, a time machine.
And just give us a picture, before we start the story of what happened to those people on that dreadful day, give us a picture of what they're doing. It's lunchtime, 24th of August, AD 79.
Let's put it into context. Pompeii is a Roman city. Like every Roman city, it's got all the public buildings, the forum, the marketplace, the basilica. It's got theatres, the amphitheatre, it's got shops, brothels, laundries, everything is going on. But on the 24th of August, it's an extremely hot and sultry day. It's the middle of the day. Perhaps some people are just finishing up work for the morning, thinking about the midday meal. Others are planning perhaps an afternoon in the baths, where they're going to cut some deals, meet their friends, that sort of thing. But then, it all goes wrong.
And they have no idea what's going to happen. And that's the story we'll be telling right the way through this programme. Thank you, Guy.
Later in the programme, we'll see just how well preserved these cities are. But first, what drew people to live in a place right underneath a deadly volcano?
The ancient cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum were built literally in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii lies just 6 or 7 miles off there to the southeast, while the smaller city of Herculaneum is even closer, just 4 or 5 miles off there to the southwest. Thanks to the minerals spewed out by Vesuvius over many thousands of years, the soil around here is extraordinarily fertile. All sorts of crops flourish here, in particular the grape and the olive. And the Roman poet Martial described the area as green with shady vines, the sort of place, as he put it, where the noble grape packed the sodden vats. Wine has always been a particularly important export from this area. It was the soil and the agricultural abundance around here that first drew settlers here up to 3,000 years ago. Centuries before the Romans conquered this area, it was occupied by the Etruscans, the Greeks, and the Samnites. But there was one problem. The region's great fertility came at a terrible price: the ever-present threat of volcanic eruption. There have been over 100 eruptions of Vesuvius in the last 6,000 years. The most infamous, the one that buried Pompeii and Herculaneum in 79 AD. So at that moment, where are we in the spectacular story of the rise and fall of Rome? Rome's history starts in 753 BC with the legend of Romulus and Remus. 509 and the Republic is established, but the rise to power is a struggle. In 390, the Gauls sack the city, but 146 marks Rome's final destruction of her arch-rival Carthage and the conquest of Greece. The chaos of the Republic's last days doesn't end till 31 BC and the Battle of Actium, won by Octavian, who becomes Rome's first emperor, Augustus. AD 43, the conquest of Britain. Then 79, the eruption of Vesuvius. 117 marks the Roman Empire at its greatest extent, stretching from Britain to Egypt and Spain to Iraq. The long, slow decline follows. Rome falls to barbarians in 410 AD, and in 476, the empire in the west collapses, by which time Pompeii and Herculaneum had been buried for nearly 400 years. But back in 79 AD, when Vesuvius erupted and the cities were frozen in time, the Roman Empire was still at the peak of its power. Surely the highly advanced and civilized people who lived here must have realized the danger they were living in. Living right under an active volcano must have seemed suicidal. It may look to us like shocking complacency, but to be fair to them, in 79 AD, Vesuvius hadn't had a major eruption for over 800 years, and it was well beyond the span of human memory. The last eruption was almost as remote to the citizens of the Bay of Naples as the Battle of Hastings is to us today.
Join us after the break when we'll be taking you into the very heart of these cities.
Welcome back. Well, while most of Herculaneum is still buried, a great deal of Pompeii has been excavated. Let's just go back now to life hour by hour through the eruption that suffocated Pompeii and roasted Herculaneum. And how hot is it?
At least 500 degrees.
Well, while most of Herculaneum is still buried, a great deal of Pompeii has been excavated. Let's just go back now to life prior to the eruption in Pompeii. And we now know that the day before the town came to such a brutal and unforeseen end, there was actually local election campaigning in full swing. Nothing ever changes. Here in Italy, just 2 days ago, they were holding a referendum about whether to reduce the powers of local government. So, let's see what sort of a city Pompeii really was like in Roman times. Here's Guy.
There's so much about Pompeii that's instantly reminiscent of a modern town and city. It had public buildings, places of worship, markets, shops, houses, even a fully fledged public water system. At least 10,000 people lived here, possibly as many as 20,000. So you can imagine the noise of the crowds and the smells and the sights that went with that. There was the urine used for washing clothes, the reek of cooking, and of course, like any self-respecting city, Pompeii had terrible traffic problems. Just look at the cart ruts here, worn down into this road over centuries of commerce and trade. The other thing about the roads, though, is that these were open sewers. Pompeii didn't have buried sewers. The Romans weren't always that brilliant at water management. The filth used to flow down here, so the good burghers of Pompeii walked across on these stepping stones to avoid literally standing in the filth of life that was Pompeii at its height. And that road system in Pompeii is what linked it to the rest of the whole Roman world, including Britain. This is the road that brought traffic in from Herculaneum, just a few miles up the coast. And it brought that traffic down this main road to the heart of Pompeii, the Forum. Now, the Forum was the centre of civic life in every Roman town, and that includes the Roman towns in Britain, like London. It was a political, commercial and religious centre where people came to see and be seen, cut their deals, show their loyalty to Rome. It was a thriving thoroughfare, just like it is today, with all these tourists milling around who could almost be Romans here on market day. There were temples to Jupiter, to Apollo. There was a market for food. There was a market for textiles. There were even once gladiatorial shows on here. It's ruinous because of the earthquake in '62 that had so badly damaged this place 17 years before the eruption of Vesuvius in '79. But if you can imagine those columns up there coming all the way along, there was once an upper story for people to look down on gladiatorial displays. But like every town, Pompeii had to be governed and managed, the people controlled. And the key buildings for that were down at the other end of the Forum. This is the Basilica, Pompeii's law court, one of the most important buildings in the city, one of the most important buildings in any Roman city. And if it looks familiar with this nave, the aisles, the columns that once reached all the way up to the roof, well, you'd be right. The Christians, much later on, adopted this building form for churches, but the Basilica started out life as the Roman law court building. This is where the magistrates heard disputes between neighbours over property, disputes between traders, that kind of thing. Now, becoming a magistrate was the climax of the Pompei elite's political ambitions. Every year on March, they'd go out, having their supporters daubing slogans over the city to slag off their opponents and say what terrific chaps they were. And it was men only, incidentally. Women couldn't hold any public office at all in Roman times. Now, electioneering seems to have been one of the most popular things in Pompeii. Pompeii's public buildings like the Forum and the Basilica are fascinating enough, but what makes this place really special are these winding back alleys where you can see everything from bakeries to shops, bars, private houses, and even getting on for, if you can believe it, nearly 40 brothels. Now, the Roman Empire might have stretched all the way from northern Britain right down to the sands of Egypt, and there are great survivals throughout that area to this day. But there is nothing like Pompeii.
I'm in Herculaneum, right at the other end of the site. Here, we're at the edges of the current excavation, and up there is the modern town of Herculaneum, perched on the very top of this cliff. Now, I'm joined with Andrew again. Andrew, tell me, where are we in the ancient city?
Well, we may be on the edges of the excavation, but we're actually at the heart of the city. The Forum, the centre of the life of the city, is right through there. And this is a really important building we're in, the Basilica.
Well, we're standing right in the Basilica here.
You can see behind us and all the way down the columns of the outer wall of the Basilica. But the inside of the Basilica is right through here.
What, you mean behind here? The Basilica's all behind here, but not excavated?
Only partially visible with tunnels, yes.
So tell me, recap, because I know we've just heard about the Basilica in Pompeii.
Yeah.
But what exactly is a basilica?
Well, a basilica is one of the really important civic institutions. It's where they have their law courts, and it's also a really important place for the public life, for honouring people, including Nonius Balbus, who's the guy who built this basilica, and there were statues of his family here.
So tell me a little bit more about what's actually been going on here, what the team's been doing.
Well, when we arrived, this whole escarpment had collapsed completely, and we've been working all around the edges of the site, trying to control this collapse, and we cleared this all away.
Well, we're going to join up with Paola here, who's the architect.
Hi.
Paola, look, if I just rubbed past this on before, and it's volcanic material that's just falling out of my hand. It's crumbling. It's got to be dangerous, this. How have you been stabilising this area?
Yeah, this is actually one of the more dangerous and very fragile excavation hedges, yes, compared also to the other ones along the side. This one is extremely fragile because of the different cooling temperature and the speed, the solidification.
So let me just make that clear a second. So you're saying that this site here, this edge, is particularly crumbly because of the way that it cooled during the volcanic eruption. eruption?
Yeah, it's due to the pyroclastic flow that came and the speed it takes to become solid.
So at this edge it's crumbly, but what further down I've seen pyroclastic mud. Did that cool in a different way?
Yeah, exactly. For instance, along the shoreline, because of the contact with the seawater, the volcanic material solidified very quickly.
So it makes
became like a rock.
Right, and up here, it's crumbling. I mean, even the camera people, I can see it, can hear it
I'm
crumbling.
nervous of you provoking
I know, and the
collapse.
houses above it. So what have you been doing to stabilise it?
Yeah, exactly. This is a very difficult challenge for us to try to stabilize because, as you said, we have the houses of the new Herculaneum on the top. So what we try to do is to stabilize as it is and try to build walls and try to waterproof the top.
Stop the water from making it worse and
Exactly.
become softer.
Exactly.
Very difficult work.
This is a yes.
Well, later on, we're going to go down a tunnel that I can just see over there, right through the volcanic flow and into the heart of the basilica. First, see you later.
Well, now, Guy, in that wonderful tour you've just given us of Pompeii there, you paint the picture of quite an advanced civilization. Was it really, though, honestly, that civilized?
It's sort of yes and no. If you took a Roman out of the Roman world and brought him to a modern British city like London or Manchester or Birmingham, he'd get it. He'd get the fact that you've got municipal government, law and order, a system of weights and measures, a way that we live together. We get a lot of our ideas about civilization from the Romans. But the other side of it is that the Roman world is a really very brutal place, a cruel place. I mean, goodness me, Pompeii's amphitheatre was closed for 10 years because of a violent riot between rival supporters, let alone the ghastly things that went on in the amphitheatre at Pompeii and in Rome and everywhere else.
And the way they treated slaves and women?
Of course, that's the other thing. The Roman Empire was built on slaves. Slaves were the machines of the Roman world. Millions upon millions of them lived nasty, short, brutish and hard lives. As for women, they had virtually no political identity and virtually no legal identity. No say really at all in their own lives.
Oh dear. Edwina, I'm not sure you'd have approved of the way you've been treated in the Roman Empire.
I think I would have done just fine, Peter. Now, Herculaneum may have been smaller than Pompeii, but it still had its fair share of important buildings. Andrew's got to know the city very well over the last few years, and I joined him on a special tour of Herculaneum's secret places, many of which are not open to the public. So how did Herculaneum actually compare to Pompeii? I mean, was it a big, bustling city?
Oh, no, it's not big at all. It's tiny compared to Pompeii. It's maybe 4,000 inhabitants. Pompeii's got about 20,000. But the astonishing thing is that in such a small town, they could have all the great public monuments. They could have their basilica, they could have their baths, something to be proud about locally.
Do they know how this place started?
The ancients thought of it as founded by Hercules, the greatest of all heroes, Hercules, and that's why they call it Herculaneum, the city of Hercules. And he's the local hero, they're very proud of him.
Good myth, but what about archaeologically?
In reality, probably 4th century BC, the earliest traces of occupation.
And these walls, they look like they might have seen some action in their time.
They were actually rebuilt at the end of the 1st century BC by the local big man, Nonius Balbus, not for defensive purposes, but because he wanted a beautiful city. You can tell they're not defensive, because right on top, instead of having catapults and soldiers and so on, you have luxury villas.
Oh, lovely, with beautiful, beautiful views.
Absolutely terrific views. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, half a dozen enormous houses with beautiful gardens, marbled rooms, and looking out over the glorious view of the bay.
Gosh, we're pretty high up here, Andrew.
We sure are. There are not many places in the Roman world where you can come up this high in a Roman apartment building. We're 2 entire stories above the shops at the ground level. Come in here. Here's one of these apartments.
Nice, it's not bad, actually.
It's perfectly decent. There's a room here and a couple of rooms behind.
And are there any examples like this in Pompeii?
Absolutely not. Pompeii only survives up to 1 floor, generally. If you're very lucky, you get a bit of the next floor. In Herculaneum, we're right under Vesuvius, and the amount of volcanic material that cascades down on the site, preserving it up to 25 meters or so, allows, when it's really well constructed, like this beautiful block here, then it survives up to this extraordinary height. It's one of the really rare possibilities in the Roman world of understanding what it was like to live on the top floor. In here we've got the suburban baths, which are absolutely the most magnificent baths surviving from the Roman world.
And this is just the entrance hall, I take it?
Yes, that's right. We've got this high arched structure with the light coming in from above.
But it's so grand. I mean, did this mean that it was just for the rich?
Absolutely not. No, any citizen, any free person can come here and bathe together. And it's a vital part of Roman life.
So would you and I be able to have come here and had a bath together?
Men and women should not bathe at the same time. Sometimes they obviously did because they kept on passing laws to say, you mustn't do it. The thing is, they bathe stark naked. Let's suppose we come through here to oil.
This is a stunning room,
Isn't it absolutely beautiful?
So you would oil possibly
So
in here?
you cover yourself with olive oil, and then you get your slave to scrape you down with a bronze strigil, removing all the oil and the filth. You might need to remove some body hair.
What, men?
Men
really?
as well as women. Frequently their leg hair, and sometimes even their underarm hair. And apparently one of the horrors of living near a bath was hearing the din, the screams made by men having their hair pulled out.
Men are such cowards. We do it all the time. Now, this has caught my eye as I walked in. What is this?
Well, this is what originally filled the entire room. This is the volcanic material, which originally arrives in a liquid form and just squeezes like toothpaste into every single space. You can see it on the walls up there too.
So it's amazing to think that this volcanic material covered the whole of Herculaneum.
And that's what kept it safe, preserved for us to see now.
This is a monster wall of volcanic material, isn't it? It's massive.
It's about 70, even 80 feet high. From the very lowest point is down by the ancient sea level, and the very highest point is there.
Incredible.
Excavating this, it's more like quarrying than excavation.
I mean, how much of the site is actually excavated?
Only a fraction. Up there in the far corner, you can see the corner of the Forum. A forum's in the middle of a town. That means we've got about a quarter of the site.
It must be tantalising to know that there's stuff underneath.
There are areas where we are desperate to get in. We are right on the corner of the Forum, of the Basilica. We know that there are inscriptions right there on the edge of our dig. Of course we want to get into it. And some little progress can be made. But there's one thing to do that. It's another thing to expose the entire ancient city.
But 2,000 years ago, people in these cities were just picking themselves up after a previous disaster. The fact is that 17 years before the eruption of Vesuvius, a huge earthquake flattened much of Pompeii and Herculaneum. But by 79 AD, these people had no idea that they were on the threshold of a much worse catastrophe. Well, I've just arrived in Herculaneum, and my goodness, the contrast with Pompeii, where I've just come from. It hits you very hard when you see that huge, great wall of mud that hit Herculaneum. It's 20 meters high, as Edwina was describing it earlier, and what it did, of course, was it preserved this city for time immemorial. I mean, 1,700 years, there was nothing here except mud, and now look what's been exposed. This extraordinary example of Roman architecture, huge, great sea wall here, that wonderful cantilevered balcony at the top, the terrace along the top, you can just see the balustrade there, people in smart villas looking over the sea. So, Roman architecture, extraordinary. But the Romans also were superlative engineers. Take their aqueducts, for example. Now, the Aqua Augusta, which poured water, fresh water, down from the mountains of the centre of Italy into these cities, that was a wonderful feat of engineering. Not just an icon of civilization, Roman civilization, but a sensational example of what they could do in engineering terms, as Guy reports.
This is one of the only surviving stretches of aqueduct in the whole Vesuvius area, so it's astonishing that it should have survived right in the middle of busy Naples. It's pretty much what anybody would imagine a Roman aqueduct to have looked like, an arcade of arches with a water channel running across the top. But the reality is that the Romans only used this type of structure to carry water across low-lying areas like valleys. Most aqueducts were in fact buried channels. There's more than 100 miles of aqueduct in the Vesuvius area. This is part of the Aqua Augusta, which fed Pompeii and Herculaneum. It was built by the Emperor Augustus about 80 years before the eruption of Vesuvius. An awful lot of it are these underground tunnels with vaulted roof, and down here hydraulic concrete, and the water flowed along the bottom. The idea of the height was so that a man could come down here and inspect for blockages and damage. It really is the most extraordinary example of the Roman genius at managing water, because they had to maintain that steady gradient from an inland source so the water would flow safely and reliably and at not too high a pressure down to the cities of the Bay of Naples area. This is the Castellum Divisiorum, which means dividing tank or reservoir. Now, it's at the highest point of the town. That's so the water could run down on into the rest of Pompeii. The water arrived from the aqueduct through this hole, passed through a coarse filter here, and then this line marks a finer screen to get the impurities out. But the really clever bit is over here. The water divides into three. We've got the channel for the public baths, public buildings. Over here, we've got the channel for private houses for the rich people, but the really important one is down the middle. This is the public fountains. So we've got the status pretty clearly marked out, but the way it worked was that the public fountain system was always prioritised. So if the water ran low in a dry season, they would still have water running to the public fountains because they could cut off the other supplies. It's a brilliant system. Now, the pipes from the Castellum Divisiorum fanned out all over Pompeii, taking advantage of the slope downhill. But of course the water built up a huge head of pressure, so it was rushed up to the top of towers at street corners where there was a tank at the top that reduced the head of water. The water came back down lead pipes, and many of those lead pipes seem to have come from the Roman lead mines of the province of Britain. The water left behind this extraordinary calcium carbonate deposit as well, which you can still see today. From here the water rushed on into the public fountain. The system was called constant offtake. It never stopped flowing, and on out into the gutter. If you were really rich, you could afford your own private supply from this system. Before the aqueduct came to Pompeii, private houses, even public baths, had to make do with the water they could pull up a bucket and chain from deep underground wells. But once the aqueduct had been installed, everything changed. Pompeii could have a number of large public bathing facilities, fountains at every street corner, and wealthy house owners could afford lovely garden pools like this one in a townhouse. This is just one Roman town. Just imagine what it was like across the whole of the Roman Empire with systems like this, providing water constantly for their populations.
Well, Guy, anybody can understand your enthusiasm for that extraordinary water system. Now, here we are by a fountain in Herculaneum. How long did we in Britain have to wait for running water like this?
It's not until the 17th century that London gets a water system anything like this. You have to go until the 19th century and into the 20th before the rest of Britain gets anything like an organised public water supply.
Extraordinarily impressive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Guy, the earthquake that hit Pompeii and Herculaneum in 62, that was 17 years before the eruption of Vesuvius. Now, what damage did that do you think, to the water system?
We know that it wrecked the water system. A lot of pipes were broken up. Some of the houses had to go back to collecting water in tanks for rainwater and using wells. And when the eruption appears in 79 AD, the Pompeians and the Herculaneums are still repairing the system. It's all work in progress.
So it can be quite a tough time being a Roman, even so, can't it? Now, okay, so Guy, we know where the water comes from. It comes from the mountains. It comes from this incredible system. Where does it go to? Well, here's probably the answer, presumably the answer: the drains. Now, here we have a drain in the street here, presumably taking the rainwater away and anything that was spilled over from the fountain, if any of Guy's wonderful engineering went wrong. Where does it go? It goes down to the sewers, and that's where it gets fascinating. And the team here at the moment are working on what really happened down there in the sewers. How did they work? And they found some very mystifying tunnels indeed.
place is stunning. Beautiful tunnels.
It's a vast tunnel network. The scale of it really took us by surprise when we first came down here. The main tunnel is over 80 meters long and as much as 3.5 meters tall in some places. It's a magnificent structure. The ceilings and walls are beautifully preserved.
So what is this place?
At first, we thought this huge structure was used to empty the public swimming pool. But in fact, when we started investigating the site, we found out it could have had a completely different purpose. We now think it could have been used as a massive cistern because of the rounded walls. They're typical of Roman cisterns.
Mimo, I noticed all these holes. What are they? What were they used for?
They're drainage holes that run down from latrines in the houses above.
So does that mean it's definitely a sewer?
It was undoubtedly used as a sewer, but it's got some very unusual features. It's a sealed system. We haven't found any outlet to the sea. It's more like a gigantic septic tank.
Is that surprising? Do Roman sewers normally empty in the sea?
Roman sewers nearly always drain into the sea, but the organic remains we found here made us certain that these tunnels were used as a sewer. We asked Professor Mark Robinson to come and analyze the material.
Mark, is that what I think it is? Roman poo?
Yes, indeed. It is fossilised 2,000-year-old Roman excrement, which has come down from the latrine shaft from the kitchen, is discharged down the wall, and calcium phosphate has been precipitated, preserving organic material.
So what are you hoping to learn by studying this area?
Well, the most interesting material will be the accumulations that have built up at the base of the sewer, which will have preserved organic remains from the sewage. Will also have various artefacts, such as potsherds, which were thrown down the latrine shaft.
Well, now, Mark, you've had the enviable task of scrabbling it down around it, all that waste, a good word for it, isn't it, down there in the sewer. What did you find? What did you pick up?
I've taken some samples, and yesterday I sieved through them, and here are some of the results. First of all, waste from the kitchen thrown into the latrine shaft. Group of seashells here. These were in the uppermost deposits. They're perhaps the last meal prepared in the kitchen of that house before the eruption.
Yeah, so there we are on that August day in AD 79, and these are the very shells that contain the fish you might have eaten.
Two sorts of scallop, limpet and tellini.
Extraordinary.
Also some other kitchen waste, broken wine glass, small cup. Here's part of an oil lamp, and most interestingly, it's got part of an eagle showing on it. The wing there, the head with the eye on it.
Oh, those are lovely, aren't they? And that's just people chucking stuff down the waste. Well, like, I suppose we might possibly chuck it down the waste in the kitchen, but we probably put it in the dustbin. But that's a dustbin.
Yes. Right. But of course there's also the material from the sewage itself, material that has passed through the human digestive tract. So, to start off with here, and I have to focus it, small semi-digested bone fragments. Here,
whatever is that?
We have the claw of a bird. Now,
someone eat that?
Yes, indeed. I had an unfortunate experience in Hungary with bird's foot stew. But the Romans certainly ate little birds.
What's it taste like, this bird foot stew?
I found it very unpleasant. But here's something else the Romans swallowed. Small fish bones. They made a type of fish sauce called garum, and it contained small fish. And if you eat it, you will eat the bones.
How tasty do you think that was, Mark?
Very, very pungent. Perhaps a liquid version of Bombay duck.
Right.
Over here, something else rather strange, at least strange to us to eat. This is the spine of a sea urchin. Given that somebody swallowed it, I assume it was prickly when eaten and might even have been prickly at the other end as well.
Now, you, of course, these are things you've dug out in the last 24 hours or so, aren't they?
Yes, sieved out and have dried.
You're quite pleased with this? I mean, do you think you've discovered a great deal about Roman diet this way?
Yes, we're showing that there's a rich Mediterranean diet. So onto the fruit remains. Now, you might think it's strange that they're preserved. You might expect them to decay, but they're preserved by the calcium phosphate mineralisation. So this is a cherry stone.
Yes.
An apple pip there. And a group of grape pips. And large numbers of fig pips.
So we're looking at quite a sophisticated diet here. I mean, how would you describe it? I mean, overall, what do you think how would you quite like to have been in one of their restaurants, having a good tuck-in?
I'm not sure I would have liked the public health aspect, but the food itself is good and varied.
Not the birdfoot stew, clearly.
I wouldn't like the birdfoot stew. Indeed, the public health aspect.
Now, what have we got here?
This is a grain weevil, something called Cytophilus, very probably infesting the cereals used to make their bread. Has been ground up and has passed through the human digestive tract, and large enough bits survive to be mineralised.
Right.
Also, of course, they would have been plagued by flies. These are latrine flies, puparia of latrine flies. These would hatch out in the latrine, and when the lid was lifted up, a cloud of small flies would fly up to the light.
All this stuff 2,000 years old. Extraordinary. It's a snapshot in time.
Yes.
And you got one final...
All right.
Guess the resistance for us. Whatever is that?
All right. That is the mandible, the lower jaw of a house mouse. Very likely a rodent pest infesting the house, accidentally fell down the latrine and met an unpleasant end.
Well, Mark, that's extraordinary. Thank you very much. So we know what their last meal was in Pompeii and Herculaneum, but what about what they were doing just in those last few minutes before they were overwhelmed by the volcano? Join us in a minute to find out.
Welcome back. Imagine an ordinary morning in August 79 AD. Some fresco painters in Pompeii are at work in a large house as Vesuvius's basement begins to rumble. To them, it's just another day. They have no idea what is about to happen. Peter takes up the story with one of Italy's most experienced Roman archaeologists at an ongoing excavation the public have never seen.
Well, here we are walking up the street of Plenty in Pompeii, and I'm with the professor who's in charge of this whole section of brand new excavation. It's Antonio Veroni, Professor Veroni. Now tell us, what are we going to see now?
We're going into the house of the chased lovers. First, you can see the street we have excavated. Come on in, please.
Thank you. Right.
We stopped digging for the time being. See, this is a door that goes through to a house that hasn't been excavated yet. We won't know for many years what's behind that door.
You could find treasures, you could find bodies, you could find a family life in there. You just don't know.
Knowing that this door connects you with a world that's 2,000 years old is very humbling.
Fantastic. And over here?
This site is linked with the block of the chased lovers. That's an ongoing dig. I'll show you some of its most interesting elements.
You can show us that now.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This is the house of the painters at work, which is partially excavated. I'll show you the main room, which gave the name to the house. This is the party room. We can still see the marks left by the scaffolding that was used by the painter to reach the upper part of the frescoes.
So this is the stand on which the painters were at work on the very day the volcano erupted.
Sure, on that very moment. The young painter has just plastered these two walls, and the plaster is still soft. So the falling lava stones leave these marks on the wall. And then there's the next painter, the master painter or Pictori Magnarius, who's painting the main picture. It is possible to see the mark of a wooden shelf upon which these pots of paint were left. We found these pots on the floor, as well as other tools.
These are original paints. This is what they actually used.
The green, the Egyptian blue, the yellow, and the black.
And what kind of paint is this? What type of paint?
They're all mineral paint, except for the black, which is vegetable. These colors are painted onto damp but firm plaster. So, when the plaster dries, the paintings are fixed.
So tell us, Antonio, about this central fresco.
Sure, the painter has just finished drawing a sketch with yellow ochre in order to give a 3D effect. You can see the fold of a man's gown, a foot, and a leg. But suddenly, they feel the first tremors of the earthquake that precedes the eruption. And the painter, who was on the scaffolding, might have lost his balance and spilled some plaster from the pot he was holding onto the painting.
And do you think he escaped?
I'm sure they ran away, but I can't tell whether they survived.
It's extraordinary to see this stuff painted just before the volcano erupted. So picture the scene in Herculaneum and Pompeii on that hot, sultry afternoon, rather as hot as it is this evening here in Herculaneum. And you've got the people there looking up at this mountain behind them, which suddenly explodes. And a huge, great column of hot ash and rock shoots up above the volcano and hangs there above the cities. Now, they've no idea, these people, what's going on. They are utterly amazed and stunned. They've never seen anything like this before, and they're totally surprised by it. So perhaps the best way to tell the story of what happens now is from the crater of Vesuvius itself. Well, what a day to be up here at the top of this angry mountain. It's a stormy day, clouds swirling around, and it's mighty cold up here too. And I'm with one of Italy's leading volcanologists, Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo. Now, Giuseppe, on this August day, August the 24th, 79 AD, what are the people down there thinking about this mountain? What do they know about this mountain?
They don't know anything about the volcanoes. So this was a normal mountain for them.
Are there any signs you'll have had before that day that this thing's going to explode?
They just felt earthquakes every day, maybe, before
the eruption. Is that usual? Is that unusual?
Unusual for them.
Before the mountain actually explodes and they see it happening, what is happening down there in that crater? What's happening under the mountain?
There is a magma chamber beneath the volcano at the depth of in the order of 5-6 kilometers.
Magma. Now that's red, molten, incredibly
rocks,
hot.
At about 1,000 degrees, with a lot of gas inside.
What causes the mountain to explode?
Near the surface, there is a rapid expansion of the gases, which cause the magma to explode.
And how big an explosion is this?
A very, very big explosion. The energy is in the order of tens of nuclear explosions, but the difference...
As big as a nuclear explosion?
Bigger, but the difference is that nuclear explosions is instantaneous. So all the energy is released in a fraction of a second. In this case, we have a continuous releasing of energy from the volcano.
Well, there was a Roman eyewitness to all this, Pliny the Younger, who watched it all from his villa away over the other side of the Bay of Naples. And this is what he says: "The cloud of extraordinary dimensions and appearance had been seen. Like an immense tree trunk, it was projected into the air and opened out with branches.
The maximum elevation, the maximum height of this column was 33 kilometers.
20 miles?
Yes, right.
All afternoon and the early evening, people are running away or looking up at this extraordinary great plume above Vesuvius, which is still staying there.
Yes.
Then something happens. What happens later on that night?
There is a collapse, the first collapse of the column. It is a terrifying event because all the material in the sky falls down. It's causing the production of hot avalanches expanding everywhere in all directions from the volcano. It is a lot of debris and gas, very fine ash, moving down at the beginning at the speed of a hurricane.
And how hot is it?
At least 500 degrees.
And the name of this great avalanche of volcanic rock and gas that's hitting Herculaneum?
Pyroclastic flows and pyroclastic surges.
Pyroclastic surges and flows. And how quickly does Herculaneum become buried?
In a few hours of the eruption, starting from the midnight.
So these pyroclastic surges and flows, they bury Herculaneum completely?
Yes, with a thickness of about 20 to 25 meters.
So the place is utterly buried?
Right.
Utterly buried.
Completely
60 feet,
buried.
70 feet deep, 20 meters away.
Completely buried.
Listening to you talking, Giuseppe, it's extraordinary how long this whole catastrophe took.
Eruptions like these are different from earthquakes, which are instantaneous. This is a long tragedy.
A long tragedy indeed. Now, Guy, what do you think the people who managed to escape from all this, as they were escaping, if you like, what did they think had happened? Why did they think it had happened?
They literally thought it was the end of the world. I mean, they had no idea it wasn't all over the rest of the world, that it wasn't just here. And imagine the sky this dark in the middle of the day, along with all the noise and the horror. Some of them thought they'd seen the shadows of giants coming out of the ground. Others thought the gods had completely abandoned them. I mean, it was absolutely terrifying. They had no idea how a volcano worked, or even that Vesuvius was a volcano. Now, Pliny the Elder, the uncle of the chap who wrote that wonderful account about the eruption, he was commander of the fleet up the coast, but he was also a natural scientist. He was fascinated in things like volcanoes. He came down here to rescue people, but also because he was desperate to find out what was going on, to investigate it. And he died.
I'll be back in a moment to tell you just what happened to those people who tried to escape.
We're back here at the edge of Herculaneum's site in the Basilica, and we're about to go into the tunnel there that has only just been reopened for the first time in a generation. In fact, no cameras or members of the public have ever been down there before. I'm with Andrew again. Andrew, tell me, why are there tunnels carving right into the Basilica here?
Well, what we're looking at with these tunnels is the origins of the history of excavation. These are the tunnels made by the first Bourbon excavators who came down in well shafts and they tunnelled along in order to discover it.
This place is quite something, isn't it?
It is an extraordinary experience.
It's very, very dramatic with these beautiful columns here. So I suppose this feels a little bit like what it would have felt like to be an excavator in the 17th century.
We're looking...
Except with a torch instead of a...
We probably will need a torch in here.
Candle.
We're looking at 1739. It's the very beginnings. The kings of Naples wanted to fill their palaces with wonderful treasurers, and they sent people down here, and they did a lot of destruction, but they mapped the whole site in this sort of rabbit warren of tunnels.
Well, let's just take a minute to look around here. I mean, first of all, you've got these beautiful, beautiful columns. And look at this one here. What's going on with this one?
Well, here you've got the top of a column shaft. Here's its bottom, and it's the sheer force of the eruption has brought it down like this. And most of the site, we see stuff that's been carefully recomposed. But because we're in the tunnels, this is what the excavators actually find. This enormous destruction, enormous lumps torn over to a side.
And are there more? Are there more tunnels?
Yes. if we can sort of follow along like the Bourbons into the Warren, if we go in here, what we see is a wonderful fragment of fresco.
Gosh, we're really having to crawl here, aren't we?
And watch out for your head too. But look up here. What they did was to hack out anything that they saw that was beautiful, because they're interested in treasures for the palace. And so they find a beautiful fresco there, they hack it out and they send it up top, and then they just backfill it and abandon it.
What a crime! I mean, what's happened to this little
We
piece of
have
fresco?
no idea where it is. It might be in the museum in Naples, it might be anywhere else. But now that we can get back again and see what they discovered, look, there's all sorts of details that are really interesting archaeologically. Do you see those little bits of wood there? That's a trellis that was in front of a window, and it slipped down from above. And then, if you look along there, you're seeing... Do you see? There's where the tunnel goes, right round the back, and it's been filled here. Do you see there are great lumps of masonry there that have been...
Stretch all the way back.
Yep. And...
well, should we go on and round a little bit more?
Yep.
So these people were treasure hunters, but they also wanted to find out about the basilica, didn't they? They wanted to learn about it. I mean, do you know what the shape is?
Thank heavens they made a map when they did these tunnels, and they made very good maps. There's slight inconsistencies in their detail, but it allows us to reconstruct the rest of it. And we can see, do you see this wonderful column here? The row of columns goes on there, and then it goes on that way.
So what
you've got is the shape like a church, or rather like what we call a basilica, a Christian basilica, with columns going around the edges and then a big row of columns down the centre.
And I can just see over here that there is some frescoes.
Yes.
Which are very beautiful, aren't they?
Well, and look at that.
There's a basket of fruit there.
Well, it looks like a fruit basket. Actually, those are metallic objects, and they're drinking vessels.
I can see it, gosh, yes. And then, so it must have been a very grand building, this, to have such beautiful, beautiful frescoes. Now, Andrew, seeing all this, it must be so tantalising for you. You must be dying to get your hands on this and to find out where the basilica actually stretches to.
Well, of course, it would be a dream, because this is one of the most important buildings in town. It would be a dream to excavate it, but we can't, because right above our heads, right up there, are modern houses. And it's extremely dangerous.
Well, listen, thank you for showing me around here. It's absolutely stunning, isn't it, this place? At the moment of the eruption, there could have been dozens of people trapped here in the basilica. After the break, we'll be finding out exactly how they died.
Now just imagine the scene here in Herculaneum. It's 12 hours after the eruption of Vesuvius up there. So near, you can almost see it in the dark. It's so close to Herculaneum. And that great column of ash and rock above Vesuvius suddenly collapses. And it comes roaring down in what's called the pyroclastic surge, we heard Giuseppe saying there. And it hits Herculaneum with unimaginable ferocity, with a great roar. What happens to the people who are still here? Well, recent finds along here on the seashore have been able to tell us the horrific story of that event. Well, here we are now on what used to be the beach of Herculaneum, and Giuseppe Mastrorenzo and I are joined by Pierpaolo Petroni, who's a bioanthropologist. Pierpaolo, what did you find on the beach?
Here, it's hard to imagine, but there was the onset beach of Herculaneum, there was the sea, and this is a 20-meter tuff deposit, deposited during the eruption. And here inside we found other victims.
An extraordinary sight. How many people are we looking at here, Pierpaolo?
We didn't excavate yet, of course, but we know that there must be about 25, 30 individuals. And most of these people was just sitting at the time of the emplacement of the first sergeant, just like this one, few standing. So just the time to fall down. But here we have this pregnant woman, because a few years ago, just at the starting of the excavation, in the beginning of the 80s, were found some very small bones of a fetus within the pelvis of this woman. And there is a young boy just laying near this woman, on the right shoulder.
So that's a pregnant woman there with a little child sleeping on her shoulder, perhaps?
Maybe
Okay.
the child was sleeping, probably at that time, because the collapse...
On her shoulder?
Yes. The first collapse happened at about midnight, so maybe at that time all children were sleeping.
Giuseppe, how did they die, these people?
Well, these people died due to the pyroclastic surge.
The pyroclastic surge, that's this great blast of heat that instantly kills them and burns their flesh.
Right, pyroclastic surge is a turbulent cloud including a lot of fine particle at very high temperature and with a lot of gas inside, mostly steam.
You can see directly from these victims the tridimensional position of these people just due to this effect, very sudden effect of the heat on these people. So the soft tissues were very rapid, substituted by the hot ash. Because when you excavate a skeleton, you always find it flat on the bottom, but not in this case.
Now, what were these people doing here?
I think that these people was just waiting for the hand of this catastrophe. They didn't know anything about eruption. Very probably they knew about earthquakes. Maybe that's why they're here inside, because this place is very safe for an earthquake, but not at all for the eruption.
Now, Pierpaolo, what happened out here on the beach? We've seen what happened inside. What was the experience of people out here?
We have some evidences here that some of them had a kind of impact. So they were laying in a different position compared with the victims found inside the chambers.
How did they die, Giuseppe?
I think they died more or less the same way of the people inside, but they were also affected by some impact due to the passage of the first pyroclastic surge. So they were also engulfed in the first pyroclastic surge.
What has been the value of these very recent discoveries of these skeletons all over the place here?
For long years, archaeologists and other kind of researchers told us that here in Herculaneum and in Pompeii as well, the people died due to suffocation. But actually, through our research, we could detect that these people died very, very sudden due to the direct effect of the temperature. So we know that at this distance from the volcano, at 6 kilometers, the people dies because of the high temperature of the surge.
So that's what happened to those people in Herculaneum here who tried to shelter in these boat sheds. And what happened to their bodies was utterly different to what happened to the people in Pompeii. These people in Herculaneum, their flesh literally vaporized in seconds. But in Pompeii, because their flesh decayed on their bodies very slowly in the light ash that landed beside them, so a cavity formed in the shape of their body over the years. And a very canny Italian archaeologist called Fiorelli in the 1860s decided that if he poured plaster into that cavity, the plaster cast that came out would of course be precisely in the shape in which that human being died at the moment of death. So there we are, that's the difference. Now, here in Herculaneum, Dr. Petroni is doing some more detailed analysis for us.
Peter, you see here, just beside the excavation, we have a small store where all the victim bones are inside.
This is your storeroom for bones?
Yes.
Now, do you show this to the public, Pierpaolo?
Not at all. It's not possible to come here inside, not even within the chambers. So this is just a lab where we can study the bones. So here we have a lot of good examples that show us how these people died.
Okay. That says cranio on the side of it. That means skull,
Yes,
does it?
skull. In this case, we have a skull with all blackening inside. They're very clear. And fractures and blackened edges to show that very high temperature of the surge.
Only
Part
part
of the
of the inside is black, the other half is clean.
Only a part of the brain was boiling, producing this blackening inside.
It's a terrifying thought. There's a sort of boiling of the brain.
Yes,
and then,
yes.
then because it's so hot in this enclosed prison of the brain, it suddenly, whoomph,
Yes.
blows open. The people who managed in Pompeii to be seen to be doing that, or to be apparently consciously reacting, did they know that something serious was going wrong?
No, this
them.
is the pugilistic attitude. The pugilistic attitude, typical of fire victims, is a posture due to the dehydration and shortening of the muscles that induce an abduction to the body of arms and legs. That's why you always find people like this.
So these people had no idea what was happening. They hadn't time to think, my goodness, I'm dying.
No, died in less than a fraction of a second. Then their hands and feet underwent thermal-induced contraction in about 1 second. Here we have a good example of a contracted hand. In fact, all the hands and feet of these people underwent thermal-induced contraction. So just in 1 second, they got this kind of contraction of upper and lower limbs. In this case, hand, and here we have a cast of the foot contracted, just in a natural position. This is the frontal part of a fetus of 7 intrauterine months. So it's a very, very young life.
Extraordinary, tiny little bones of this unborn child. Surely irony is that the people themselves knew as little about what was happening to them at that moment as this fetus. Is extraordinary, isn't it?
Andrew, seeing this space, the College of Augustales, as it is now, it's really hard to imagine that once upon a time it was full right to the brim with volcanic material. It must have just gushed in here.
Oh yes, it's a wave after wave of the pyroclastic flow, just overwhelms the site and fills it right up. So you can see 20 feet above our head, there are those wonderful frescoes, and then do you see the carbonized wooden beams which run right round our heads? And all that is preserved by this terrific destruction.
I mean, it's a very grand building, this. What was it used for?
Well, it's a clubhouse. It's a clubhouse for this really interesting group, the Augustales, priests of Augustus. And what's interesting about them is that they're ex-slaves, they're citizens, but they have been promoted, and they have been promoted to this club. And they worship the emperor. And right here, there'll be a statue, probably, of the Emperor Augustus. And their job is to worship him.
And this would have been the clubhouse. So slightly like a Nouveau-riche clubhouse.
It's the best club to belong to.
And it's in quite an important area, isn't it? It's got the basilica and the forum nearby. So it must have been quite important as a building.
Yes, the ex-slaves here are keeping their end up. The town councillors will have their place over there, and they're part of a context of important people.
We have to look at these. These are so beautiful. I think they're the most beautiful frescoes I've seen in Herculaneum. What's going on in this picture?
This is Hercules. In fact, both frescoes are the same hero, Hercules, who is, of course, the hero of the town of Herculaneum. And Hercules is sitting here. He's just been promoted to become a god. And when you think of it, it's very nice. There's Hercules, he's become a god. There's Augustus, who was an emperor. He's been promoted to a god. And then they're the members of the clubhouse. And they're slaves who've been promoted to citizen. And then they've been promoted to members of the club.
It's all very fitting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's beautiful, beautiful, vivid colours here. And these frescoes have been really well preserved, haven't they? Now, I'm going to go and meet Monica. Hi, Monica.
Hi.
Now, you're part of the project, aren't you? The chief conservator. Tell me what's been going on with this pillar. I know you've been worried about this pillar, so you've been doing some work. What have you actually been doing?
Yes, this lower part of the decoration was completely detached from the wall. The inside layers were gone, so we had to fix it to the wall again, injecting material, lime and volcanic sand, mortar.
You actually used the volcanic sand?
Yes, just the same, yes. We inject it, but mostly we really fill it in because it is so open, you see. And then we fix these areas, and we are sure that the thing is still stick to the wall.
So I understand this, you stabilise it between the plaster and the actual brick behind here, is that right?
Yes.
So you stop the plaster bit from falling off?
Yeah, because inside layers go away, they crumble away because of salt crystallization, humidity and so on.
So it's another example of where Herculaneum is crumbling and you're doing your first aid
yes.
to help it. Well, we're going to catch up with you later on,
yes.
So we'll see you then.
Okay.
So what do they do with works of art that they discover in these two cities, in villas like this one here, for example? Now, this little house is called the House of the Relief of Telephus, after this rather fine relief over here. Here's a chap called Telephus on the right, he's the son of Hercules, and rather unkindly, Achilles on the left over here stabbed him with a spear, but Achilles is rather worried because if he doesn't take the spear out and sort out Telephus, he won't capture Troy. So it's all a bit of a mess. Now, that relief is actually a plaster cast, like these are plaster casts over here. These things up here, these magnificent discs, are actually oscilla, and they oscillate. The marble originals would oscillate in the wind. Lovely feeling in this beautiful courtyard here, those oscillating in the wind, waving around. Now, these originals are all in museums, but we've had particularly exciting access. Edwina's been in there with Andrew, access to a storeroom in which we see some of these artifacts that the public simply don't get a look at.
In here we can see what makes Herculaneum, in my view, absolutely special. This is where the carbonized wood is preserved.
Look at this gallery of wood, it's incredible.
It's a treasure trove. Here, for instance, we have a bed. You can see the wooden frame and cross pieces down there, and then round the edges, this beautifully worked edging material with marquetry. You don't find beds, you don't find wood in normal Roman sites. In Herculaneum, there are a couple of dozen wooden beds surviving, and not just beds.
Why in Herculaneum?
That's all to do with the way the site is destroyed, this pyroclastic flow. We're talking about intense heat, 400–500 degrees centigrade, and it cooks the material. Look at this. Look how black it is, and you see the cracks across it. That is a wooden chest that has been subjected to intense heat. It's been put in a furnace. All the vapour goes off it instantly, and it turns into carbon. Exceptionally, over here, you've got a piece that isn't even carbonized, and by now, the pyroclastic flow must have been much cooler, and even so, it survived. It comes from the suburban baths, and you can see all the little details of the decoration on this little cupboard door. It is astonishing to be able to look at a real piece of wood that survives from over 2,000 years ago.
There's so much stuff here, Andrew. There's benches, tables. What's this?
That's a bit of a winch for winching up the rope from a well. So you've got very practical stuff.
And look at this, and the detail.
This is a household shrine. It's built like a temple. So you've got these columns, and they're beautifully fluted. They've got little Corinthian capitals up there. So in miniature, it's as if you're going into the temple, you open the doors of the temple, and there were little statuettes of your household gods.
But Andrew, why did the Romans pay such attention to detail?
Because this is civilization. They surround themselves with beautiful things, but things that take skill to create. That's what makes them not like barbarians.
So is it just wood that was preserved here at Herculaneum?
No, it's not wood, it's any organic material. So there's cloth. Over here you've got a bit of a basket, some sort of wicker basket, possibly for fishing. And here is one of the most absolutely astonishing things from the site. It's a loaf of bread.
That is mind-blowing. A loaf of Roman bread with something written on it, isn't it?
That's right. You've got a couple of letters here, an A and an M. Before they took the bread to the baker, they would stamp it so their name was on it and they could identify it.
Andrew, I can't believe I'm looking at a loaf of Roman bread.
I wouldn't recommend you eat it, but at least you can get a very good idea of what it was like for an ancient Roman.
Well, that woodwork is quite extraordinary. Now, joining me is an expert on architecture. He's an architect, and he's with the Herculaneum Conservation Project team, Jonathan Rizzi. Jonathan, how well did the Romans build their houses like this?
They were cleverly built, richly finished, as you can see. Very well designed, not strictly speaking very well built, at least not in the sense of durability and strength of materials like the Romans did, extraordinary builders with the Colosseum, with the public building. In their houses, they were not so concerned with...
Come look at this column over here. I mean, here we have a column in this house with pretty well decayed at the bottom, rather rough fluting here, which looks as if it's kind of plastered on, and then brick at the top. Is that well built?
It's cleverly built. They are very simple material, fire, clay, terracotta inside as a structural nucleus, structural core, and then a very thick plaster, finely polished, extremely well colored, to give a very rich finish.
Pretty, but not that substantial.
No.
What's the way to preserve this? What about a roof over the whole thing? What can you do? Maybe you can lend you the Millennium Dome in London. They wouldn't mind.
I hope not.
No, really?
No. That would be a possibility, of course. But can you imagine a day like today what the heat would be under a roof like that? But apart from that, there are other reasons. I think that the most interesting thing of Herculaneum is the feeling of being in an ancient city. If you cut the relation with the sky, with the sea, with the Vesuvius.
Okay, so what do you do? I mean, just try and put roofs over the houses.
We should do what we are doing, repairing the existing roof, putting back new roofs where needed be, with some prudence and carefully, because we don't want to turn the place into a Disneyland.
And a huge challenge it is. Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Behind the scenes in Pompeii, there's another remarkable structure that the regular visitors never get to see. Its survival gives us a snapshot of street life as the city died. It's a bakery with a restaurant behind, which looks like it could still be trading today.
So what's this, Antonio?
This is a bakery.
It's a bread shop, a bakery, isn't it? And what are these... What are the animals doing here?
These animals here would have worked the millstone. We are standing in the stable.
They worked the grindstones, we'll see in a minute. Okay.
Esatto.
And where are the people? Where's the baker?
We didn't find any human bodies in here. The inhabitants must have run for it. Interestingly, this door was locked, which indicates that they probably expected to return after the eruption.
So the guy just ran for it, slammed the door, and said, I'll come back later.
This is where the donkeys and mules worked. There would have been two wooden sticks tied to the animal's collar. They probably whipped the donkeys, who would in turn make the mill spin. The grain was poured in from the top and then ground into flour. Next, they would have taken the flour and headed over here to knead it with the water.
They bring it over here.
A wooden stick was mounted on a nail, which would then be turned to make the dough.
Okay, so they take the dough and then they make it into loaves?
Sì, si manipolava il pane, si dava adesso forma, dopodiché veniva portato.
After they shaped the bread, they brought them to the oven. As you can see, it is very similar to the ones that we use today to make pizzas.
Aha! And what's it taste like, this bread?
Io non ho mai mangiato.
I've never eaten it.
You're supposed to know these things, you're an archaeologist.
Sì, certo, una volta cotto il pane.
Once the bread was baked, it was brought to the wooden counter. You can still see the marks on the floor.
There's a wooden counter here.
I clienti che accorrono dalla strada.
The customers came in off the street.
Che non ha i soldi per pagare.
And this is interesting. It looks as if someone didn't have enough money to pay for his order. So the baker keeps a tally of the transaction on the wall.
Oh, wonderful. So they could sort of make a tab up and come back and pay the next day. Wonderful. And these are just figures, just
yes, they're numbers.
Money, numbers of coins or money or whatever.
We'll never know, but we do know that they are numbers, accounts of some kind.
Una cosa molto interessante.
This was not only a bakery. We also believe it might have been a restaurant.
Un locale di ristorazione, come ci mostra questo triclinio. Questo è un affresco famoso perché ha dato il nome a questo.
This is a very famous fresco because it gave the name to this site, the house of the chaste lovers. The two lovers are kissing each other. The kiss is passionate, yet chaste.
Ma casta. Avevamo da poco trovato nelle terme suburbane delle
We have found some pretty hardcore scenes in the suburban baths.
a 3, a 4.
Images of threesomes, foursomes, homosexual love. So, seeing this couple who just kiss, a kiss has never offended anyone. That's why we call it the house of the chaste lovers.
Nessuna latitudine, e allora casa dei casti amanti.
Unusual for a Roman fresco about love, isn't it? Normally one expects something more explicit.
Certo.
Now come with me into this little shop where the team are working, and we're going to come back and talk to Monica in a minute. But this shop would have been selling food and wine, and this is where the amphoras would have been kept up here with all the wine in it. And I just want to show you into this back room very quickly, so come with me. You can see that it would have been quite a nice room, this, with quite beautiful frescoed walls. And here is another bed. Getting a little bit blasé of the beds in Herculaneum here. There must be over 10, but it's crumbling away. And I think it's one of the projects the team are planning to do at some point soon. And over here, they're busy working and rescuing this fresco here, working behind there. And I can see this area. Hi, Monica again.
Hi.
I've joined Monica again. Talk to me about what's going on here.
Here you see it's an area similar to what we saw before, but it is even worse. It's just bulging out. And we have to fix it back and be sure that it doesn't fall down.
I mean, it looks like it's literally like a boil exploding out behind there.
Yes.
So you're having to do the same work and fill it with volcanic material and lime.
Yes, it's the same.
And stabilize it.
But here we have another problem. Is this area? You see, this is the paint layer which is flaking off.
Oh yes, I can see.
So we
yes.
can lose the body. In this case, it's a body there.
So this is here is a fresco behind here.
This is a fresco.
A lost fresco that hasn't been seen for quite some years.
We have some pictures from the archive of the Superintendenza around 1957, and they show the scene is there. It's quite dirty already. So in order to do that, we have to soften these areas because we cannot push them back. And for that, we are trying to clean out this crust, this grey crust.
And I can see, I mean, it would be such a tragedy if this crust, if all this paint fell off, because there's a body under here, isn't there? You can see that. And I can see here that there's another body here. So this is an example of some work you've already done, is it?
Yes, we are trying to understand how to dissolve, to soften that layer, to push back those flaking of paint layer. And in the meanwhile, we are understanding how to clean it.
And how long will a whole area like this actually take you?
Oh, this is long. We are trying, and it is quite long. I think to clean it and to have it finished at least 4 months, 5 months.
Really? As long as that for an area like this?
Yes, I think.
Well, listen, good luck with the rest of your rescue work here.
Thank you.
Well, many of the items recovered in these villas all around here, across the street here, all these lovely houses, they really remind us of domestic items that we have 2,000 years later. It's quite extraordinary. And Andrew's been showing us around his storeroom to show more of these wonderful items.
These things are just ordinary household objects from Herculaneum, but I'm always amazed by the quality and the range of them. These are just examples of pottery lamps. This is the sun god Apollo. You can see the rays of light coming from his head. Over here, this is a rather special lamp, and it's got 2 nozzles for 2 wicks, 2 burners. It's got a little reflector at the back.
It's beautiful.
This is Jupiter, the king of the gods, and his eagle, his big symbol, underneath him.
So this is the pottery, domestic pottery, but I can also see there's so much bronze here.
Bronze covers the whole range of household goods. It can be completely practical stuff, like that's a water boiler.
So, like a kettle?
Just a big kettle, yes. It was important to them to have water because they like to have hot water in their wine, so it's good for a feast. Just as you get pottery lamps, you get bronze lamps. This is a really top-range lamp, and it's got a great big handle which is turning into a sort of sea monster. And in the beak of the sea monster there's this shell, so you can have a wick in here, one light burning there and one light burning down there.
The craftsmanship is just wonderful, isn't it?
Everyone was individually made.
I mean, even these little pots and pans.
This is particularly a good example. This is a sacrificial pan.
So how do you know that?
You see, it has a special shape with a boss in the middle. You put in a little flour and fruit and nuts, and you pour it onto the altar, onto the burning flame. And because it's so special, you treat the details. Here's a ram's head at the end, and where the handle joins the pan, you've got another little head.
And then look at these little figurines here.
These figurines are household gods. These are really precious objects. You put them in the little shrine, the little wooden shrine in your house. This one's Hercules. This is the god of the town. You can tell it's Hercules because he's got his big bushy beard. He's got his muscular torso. Over his left hand, he's got his lion skin. In the right hand, there would be the club.
Would they have prayed to these?
Yes. They make little offerings. That's why they need little sacrificial pans.
And then there's this stunning object here. What is that?
Oh, this is an extraordinary thing. That it's only just come out of restoration. It had been sitting in this storeroom all dirty for years. And they sent it off for restoration. What emerged was this wonderful inlay. You see there's a vine that runs around it with little silver leaves, silver tendrils, and golden bunches of grapes hanging down. We know that they called this sort of stuff Corinthian bronze, because it had these special inlays, and we know they paid enormous prices at auction for it.
Well, I'm afraid nothing anything like as elegant as that in my kitchen at home. It really is wonderful stuff. In our final part, in just a moment, we'll be looking at one of the most lovely things that they've just been able to reveal to us here, one of the recent discoveries that they've made here. And also in our final part, we look at what would happen to the millions of people around Naples and that terrifying mountain Vesuvius today if it erupted again in 2006.
We've seen what a devastating effect Vesuvius had on Pompeii and Herculaneum in AD 79. But it didn't stop there. The volcano has erupted many times since, most recently in 1944. So what's the likelihood of it erupting again right now? Peter has been finding out.
Just to remind us that this volcano is still active, Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo is showing me now a lava flow that happened as recently as 1944. Giuseppe, could Vesuvius erupt again?
Of course. We know that this is an active volcano, and the last eruption has occurred only about 60 years ago. And presently we have a lot of earthquakes and other phenomena which indicated that there is activity beneath the volcano.
How much warning do you expect to get of another eruption?
About a couple of weeks, at least a couple of weeks, but probably more.
Now that eruption of 79 AD, the one that destroyed Pompeii and Herculaneum down there, is that the worst it can ever be?
No, it's not, because there is a worst case which we have identified in the history of the volcano, an eruption which has occurred 4,000 years ago, which is capable to destroy all the area around Vesuvius, including Naples. In that case, about 3 million people will be at risk.
So let's be clear about this. 4,000 years ago, this mountain erupted and destroyed an area almost as far as the eye can see, as far as Naples over there.
Everything.
If that happened again, then you say 3 million people will be at risk. How possible would it be to save them?
The people must be evacuated before the eruption, otherwise everybody will be killed.
Well, this is the Vesuvius Monitoring Center in Naples. This is the director, Dr. Giovanni Macedonio. Now, Giovanni, what's happening to Vesuvius right now?
Now Vesuvius is quiet. Just in this morning there was a very small earthquake.
Would we feel this kind of movement if we were there right now?
Nobody can feel this movement.
It's very small.
It's very small. The magnitude is 0.2 Richter scale. So
now, what is the likelihood of a big eruption on the scale of the one of 79 AD?
So it's very small probability.
Really?
Really.
Because one American professor only this year estimated that there's a 50% chance of that kind of eruption happening within 1 year. Could he be right, this guy? I mean,
no, he cannot erupt in the next year, for sure.
How do you know?
Because all the signals that we monitor 24 hours a day show us that there are no anomalies in these signals.
Well, for the sake of those people who live around that volcano, let's hope you're right. But just in case he's wrong, let's have a look at the traffic in Naples and the area around Vesuvius. It's extraordinary. It's an absolute deadlock all the time. I mean, I can't believe that if there's not another eruption of Vesuvius, there won't be archaeologists in 2,000 years' time looking back and having an absolute field day of what they find of Vesuvius and Naples in 2006. But they probably won't get anything so exciting out of the ground as they found here in the last few months. Just earlier this year, in this pile of rubble here, they dug out the most wonderful find. It was an Amazon head, the head of an Amazon warrior, and they dug it out of here, this pile of rubble just outside the basilica, and they put it in a special storeroom. It's very delicate and it's very fragile. And Edwina's there right now looking at this quite remarkable piece of archaeology.
Should we have a look at it? I've been dying to see this, Monica. I'm with Andrew and Monica, who's the chief conservator of the team. And here should be the statue head. It is. It's beautiful. Monica, it's very special, isn't it, because of the paint?
Yes.
The painted eye and painted hair. But tell me, where were you when it was discovered?
I was not here. I was in Brussels coming back to Naples, and then I received a telephone call saying a painted statue, a painted head was found. And I just said, please keep it wet as much as you can, put it into a plastic bag, don't let it dry.
So don't touch, wait for me to get there. So why
don't clean it.
Don't clean it, whatever you do. But why was it so important for you to be here?
Because objects are used to be in wet climate, in wet area, and then they dry too quickly and they can disintegrate, not in the case of marble, but the paint layer could have been damaged drying too quickly.
So you had to dry it very, very slowly?
Yes, slowly, yes, with no changes.
And how did you conserve the special paint area?
You see it very well here. You have these remainings of the material, volcanic material that we removed. In fact, we just took it off like this,
I see.
And with brushes, soft brushes. We have two layers, a coarse one and a very thin one, the one you see here,
yes,
which is dust that was in the air. And this, I think, has protected the surface.
At the time of the eruption, you mean? The dust from the time?
Yes, was everywhere. And you can then just break it down.
I can see that. Gosh, Andrew, you must have been very excited to hear that the team had made such a find. I mean, how significant is this?
No, it's fantastic, but what's so important about it is that Monica was there for it, to have a conservator actually involved in the archaeology. So many heads must have been found in the past with very
paint.
Similar paint, but was simply washed away. And that means that this is the best preserved example we have from anywhere in the Greek and Roman world.
Not just Herculaneum?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
And that means we have a fantastic insight into the big mystery of what a coloured statue head was like, because it's well known that they did colour their statues, and modern taste likes the white marble,
yes,
and thinks they must have been crazy to slap paint on it, and many reconstructions look really very ugly.
Yeah.
And this, you can see how wonderfully delicate the paintwork is.
Well,
and you see how it concentrates around the area of the eye.
It's just so subtle, isn't it, and so perfect.
And it brings it to life, because for the ancients, the life resides in the eye. You can see into the soul through the eye. And so here's our Amazon lying peacefully, but still alive, thanks to the paintwork.
It really is. Thank you so much for showing it to me. It's an absolute privilege.
That's wonderful, guy. You've got a real sense of the thrill of archaeology there. Unbelievable. Yes. What's been the most impressive thing you've learned about Pompeii and Herculaneum all over the few years you've known so well?
The thing is context, Peter. If you look at any regular archaeological site, you're going down, trying to piece together a three-dimensional world out of two dimensions. But here, it's all in context for you. You can understand so much more about the Roman Empire in a place like this.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? And Andrew, can you join us now? You're back from that wonderful experience we had. One of the things I've noticed tonight, and I think we all have, haven't we, Edwina, is the meticulous way in which you guys go about your business. Extraordinary detail you go down to find out about all this.
Exactly. Looking at things under the microscope is the best chance now of getting new knowledge. Those Bourbon excavators only were interested in great big things like statues. We want to look at the detail.
Tell us about Herculaneum on Pompeii, in a much wider context, Herculaneum on Pompeii. How important are the finds here in these cities compared to everything else in the world? What's really special about them?
The finds of these cities are the reference point for understanding the finds right across the Roman world. So it is the best collection that exists, and it's largely unpublished.
And your dream, you've got 3/4 still of this extraordinary city of Herculaneum still uncovered. You must be dying to get in there. What's your dream of what you can do?
Well, our mission is to ensure that this site is still here for the next generation, to help the wonderful local superintendency achieve that mission. Our dream, of course, is to add new knowledge, to build on, to excavate, maybe to look at the basilica, maybe to join it up far away with the theatre.
Andrew, thank you very much, and thank you too, Guy. And it just remains for us to thank all those people on and off the site who've been so wonderful to us and allowed us to get this opportunity. The people like the Superintendenza di Pompeii and the Herculaneum Conservation Project. Through them, we've had this extraordinary snapshot of life at the height of the Roman Empire. Thank them very much too from all of us.
And from all the team in Italy, good night.
Good night.